Dr. Marcus Chen stepped out of the transport ship with his hands shaking slightly. He had prepared for this moment for 6 months, working day and night to create a proposal that would make humanity worthy of joining the galactic community. The diplomatic station hung in the empty space between worlds, like a silver coin floating in darkness. The corridor was cold and sterile as he walked toward the main conference chamber. His suit felt too tight, and he kept touching his jacket pocket, where his late wife's wedding ring hung on a thin chain. He had worn it every day for 3 years, now since her death from the illness that came too fast. Even in this moment of historic importance, he found comfort in knowing she was somehow still with him. The Zhen Collective had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, their technology beyond anything humanity had managed to develop. The fact that they had agreed to meet with Earth at all was surprising. Some said it was because humans showed promise. Others said the Shen were simply curious about this new species that had suddenly learned to jump between stars. When Marcus entered the grand chamber, he stopped breathing for a moment. The entire room was made of crystalline material that seemed to shift color with every angle. The walls gleamed in shades of blue and violet and green, as if reflecting emotions that had no names in human language. At the far end of the chamber, seated on a throne that looked more like frozen water than metal, sat Queen Vexithara. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with human standards of beauty. Her form was tall and geometric, made entirely of what looked like living crystal that refracted light into countless colors. Her eyes were deep purple, and they seemed to contain entire universes within them. When she looked at Marcus, he felt like she was reading every thought he had ever had. Queen Vexithara raised one crystalline hand in greeting, and her voice filled the chamber. It sounded like the ringing of ice bells mixed with the hum of vast machinery, yet somehow Marcus understood every word. "Welcome, Dr. Chen of Earth. We have waited to hear what your species has to offer this galactic community." Marcus approached the throne, his legs moving forward even though his mind was screaming at him to run back to the ship. He bowed because that seemed like the right thing to do, and when he straightened up, he felt the weight of her gaze pressing against him like physical force. "Your Majesty, I am honored to represent my people. Today, Earth has only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. But we bring something unique to the galaxy. We bring the capacity to dream, to hope, to imagine things that do not yet exist. We are not the fastest or the strongest, but we are adaptive and creative." He reached into his jacket and felt for the ring again. His hands were trembling, and he hoped the Queen could not see it. He pulled out a data drive that contained Earth's proposal, holographic images of Earth's natural beauty, records of human innovation, examples of art and music and literature. The Queen leaned forward slightly, and a movement that was barely perceptible but somehow conveyed intense interest. She extended her hand, and Marcus approached to place the drive in her crystalline palm. When his human fingers touched her crystal surface, he felt a strange sensation like touching ice that somehow burned. "Your people value emotion," she said, and it was not a question. "According to our data, human decisions are often clouded by feeling rather than logic, yet you claim this as a strength." Marcus felt sweat running down his neck. He had known this question would come, had rehearsed his answer 1,000 times, but now with those enormous purple eyes watching him, all his careful words seemed to evaporate from his mind. "Your Majesty, emotions are not clouds that obscure judgment. They are the reason we care about anything at all. My people built cities not because logic demanded it, but because we wanted homes for those we loved. We created art, not because it served survival, but because beauty matters to us. We explore not to conquer, but to satisfy our curiosity about the universe around us." As he spoke, he unconsciously pulled the ring from its chain and held it where the light could catch it. The crystal of the ring flashed brilliantly, This ring belonged to my wife, Sarah. She died 3 years ago from illness. Logically, I should discard this object. It serves no practical purpose. Yet I carry it every day because my love for her was the most important thing in my life. More important than achievement or success or recognition, the emotions that connected me to her made me want to be a better person. For the first time in the conversation, Queen Vexithara's crystalline form began to flicker with colors that seemed unusual. Flashes of red and gold ran across her surface like lightning through glass. Her advisors who stood at the sides of the throne seemed to notice this immediately. One of them, an older Gen who Marcus later learned was called Thresh, stepped forward with obvious concern. "Your Majesty, perhaps you should rest. The human may be attempting to manipulate your neural pathways with his storytelling." Queen Vexithara raised her hand in a gesture that silenced Thresh immediately. Her gaze never left Marcus, and she seemed to be studying him with renewed intensity. "No, for Thresh. This is fascinating. Dr. Chen's species operates at a fundamental level that we abandoned 3,000 years ago when we chose logic over feeling, when we chose efficiency over wonder. This is not manipulation. This is simply honest human nature." She stood from her throne and descended the steps toward Marcus. He fought every instinct that told him to step back. The queen was perhaps 2 full heads taller than him, and her crystalline form seemed to glow with its own internal light. "Tell me, Dr. Chen, what does hope feel like to you?" Marcus had not expected such a question from an ancient queen of a vast galactic empire, but he answered truthfully. "Hope feels like standing at the edge of darkness and believing that light is still possible somewhere beyond. Even when logic says that survival is unlikely, a hope makes us try anyway. It makes us care about tomorrow." Queen Vexithara was silent for a long moment. Her crystalline form continued to flicker with those strange colors, and Marcus realized he was seeing something unprecedented. An ancient being was experiencing emotion for the first time in centuries, and it was beautiful and terrifying. "The Zhen Council will review your proposal, Dr. Chen. You will remain on this station for as long as the negotiations require. I wish to learn more about these emotions that your people value so highly. Perhaps before we decide whether Earth deserves a place in our galaxy, I should understand what makes your species truly unique." Marcus felt relief wash through him as he bowed again. He did not know that this conversation was about to change the fate of 2 entire civilizations. He could not see that the flickering colors in the queen's crystalline form represented the beginning of something that would either destroy her world or transform it forever. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus first spoke to Queen Vexithara, and everything had changed in ways he could never have anticipated. The Queen had requested his presence at private dinners every evening, a decision that sent shockwaves through the political circles of both Earth and the Shen collective Thresh. The elder advisor, who served as keeper of Zhen traditions, had begun expressing serious concerns about the Queen's behavior to other members of the Royal Council. On this particular evening, Marcus walked through the crystalline corridors of the Zhen flagship. The walls around him seemed to shimmer with softer colors than they had before, and he learned that this was the Queen's doing. She had personally ordered the lighting adjusted to be less harsh, more in keeping with human sensibilities. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about how much she was thinking about him. The Queen's private chambers were unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The entire room appeared to be carved from a single enormous piece of crystal, and it opened on one side to a vast viewport showing distant stars. The Queen stood at this viewport when Marcus entered, so her form silhouetted against the infinite darkness beyond. "Dr. Chen, please come and look at this," she said, her voice carrying that same bell-like quality that had fascinated him from the beginning. Marcus crossed the chamber and stood beside her at the viewport. The view was spectacular, stars spreading across the darkness in every direction. The queen remained silent for a long moment before speaking again. Your species experiences wonder when observing the cosmos. Our people once felt this sensation thousands of years ago, but we have learned to suppress it. We classified wonder as inefficient, as a waste of cognitive resources. Yet since our conversation 3 weeks ago, I find I cannot stop experiencing this sensation when I observe the stars. Marcus turned to look at her, and he saw that her crystalline form was flickering with those same colors he had witnessed during their first meeting. Not just the steady blue and violet that was her normal state, but streaks of gold and red and colors he had no names for. Your Majesty, wonder is not a waste. It is what drives discovery. It is why we explore and learn and grow. But it makes decision-making complicated, the Queen said, and Marcus could hear something in her voice that might have been sadness. Our entire civilization has been optimized for perfect logic and perfect efficiency. We eliminated emotion because we believed it caused war and suffering. We eliminated art because it served no survival purpose. We eliminated music because it distracted from work. We became perfect, Dr. Chen. And in becoming perfect, we became empty. She turned away from the viewport and looked at Marcus directly. Her purple eyes seemed deeper than before, as if they contained not just universes but emotions that had been locked away for millennia. Tell me about your wife Sarah again. I want to understand what love means to your species. Marcus felt his throat tighten as he spoke about Sarah. He described how they had met at university, how she had made him laugh, how she supported him when his career seemed impossible. How marriage was not just a logical partnership, but a choice to spend your entire life connected to another person, sharing joy and sorrow, building something together that neither could build alone, as he spoke. My Queen Vexithera asked questions with the intensity of someone trying to solve an impossible equation. What does it feel like when the person you love is suffering? What makes you willing to sacrifice your own safety for another? What is the difference between love and loyalty? When he finished telling her about Sarah's final days, how he had held her hand and told her he would carry her memory forward in everything he did, the Queen's crystalline form was flickering so intensely that it looked like she was vibrating. "This is extraordinary," she whispered. "Your species inflicts this pain upon itself voluntarily, and yet you call it beautiful." "Because the joy was worth the pain," Marcus said simply. "Because loving Sarah was worth the heartbreak of losing her." The next morning, Thresh appeared at Marcus's quarters with grave news. The Queen had dismissed him from his position as primary advisor. She had done so in a public session of the Royal Council, telling him that his concerns about her emotional decay showed a fundamental misunderstanding of what leadership meant. She had questioned his loyalty and his relevance to a civilization that needed to evolve. She is not herself. Thresh said to Marcus, his crystalline form flickering with what might have been anger or fear. "You have infected her mind with your human weakness. She will destroy everything we have built." But Marcus could see the truth that Thresh refused to acknowledge. The Queen was not becoming weaker. She was becoming more authentic. She was awakening to parts of herself that had been dormant for centuries. And yes, and it made her more complicated, but it also made her more real. That evening, as Marcus and the Queen dined together in her chambers, she shared something that shocked him. She explained that she had lived for 300 years through the rise of 3 galactic empires, through the development of technologies that made stars themselves useful for power generation. Through all of that time, she had never once felt anything. She had simply calculated, analyzed, and executed decisions with perfect logic. Until 3 weeks ago, when a human who had known loss and pain spoke to me about hope, she said softly. And suddenly I found myself experiencing something my people abandoned so long ago that we forgot it even existed. I found myself feeling alive. Marcus reached across the table and carefully placed his hand over hers, his human skin against her crystal surface, warm against cold, and yet there was heat in both of them now. "Is this what your people call attachment?" she asked. "Among other things," Marcus replied with a gentle smile. "But yes, this is the beginning of something very human." As they sat together in the soft light of the Queen's chambers, neither of them noticed that Thresh was watching from the corridor. His face was clouded with determination. A plan was forming in his ancient mind, and he had already begun gathering support from the traditionalists who feared the future more than anything else. The Queen's awakening was only the beginning of the chaos that would soon follow. The news of Queen Vexithera's emotional behavior spread through the Shen collective like a virus, except it was not a disease that killed bodies, but a contagion that killed confidence in leadership. Within 5 days of Thresh being dismissed, emergency council sessions had begun. Private messages were sent to noble houses discussing the Queen's fitness to rule. Ancient laws that had not been invoked in 10,000 years were being dusted off and reread by traditionalists who saw an opportunity to restore what they called order. On Earth, the situation was equally chaotic. Dr. Chen's government had received reports of his involvement with the Queen, and the media was having a field day. Is the diplomatic mission a success, or has our representative been compromised by alien technology? Had Marcus fallen under some kind of mind control? Were the Zhen using him to gain strategic advantage? These questions screamed from news screens across every human colony world. In one particularly heated session in Earth's United Nations chamber, a general named Harrison stood and demanded that Marcus be recalled immediately. "We are sending our best diplomat to negotiate with an advanced alien species, and instead he is playing romantic games with their leader. This is insane. This compromises everything we have worked for." But another voice rose in defense. Dr. Amelia Okafor, who had worked alongside Marcus for years. He stood and made a passionate argument. "Marcus is doing exactly what we sent him there to do. He is building a bridge between our people. He is showing the Shen what makes humanity valuable. He is proving that emotion and logic are not enemies but partners in creating something greater than either could achieve alone." The council was divided, but orders were nonetheless prepared. An official message was drafted telling Marcus to focus purely on diplomatic matters and to cease all personal contact with the Queen. The message was sent with a directive that was clear and unambiguous. Return to protocol or face reassignment. Marcus received the message in the Queen's private chamber as they watched the stars together. The Queen read the words over his shoulder, and he felt her crystalline hand tense against his back. "Your government fears what we have discovered," she said quietly. "They believe that our connection is a threat. They fear the unknown." Marcus replied, "It is human nature. Fear can be as powerful as love sometimes, and it can make people act irrationally." The Queen turned to face him, and for the first time, Marcus saw something that looked like fear in her ancient eyes. "The Shen Council has summoned me to the Chamber of Logic tomorrow. They will present their findings regarding what they are calling my emotional decay. They will demand that I undergo neural purification to remove these feelings, or they will move to have me removed from power." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. They can do that. They can remove a queen who has ruled for 3 centuries. "Our laws are very old and very specific," Vexithara said. "A ruler whose judgment is compromised by emotion was deemed unfit to lead. Our founders created these laws because emotions had nearly destroyed our species thousands of years ago. But what they did not understand is that emotions are not the problem. It is how we use them that matters, and I have learned from you that emotions used wisely can create beauty and strength instead of destruction." The next morning, Marcus sat in the gallery of the Chamber of Logic, hidden behind what he thought was a simple decoration, but what the queen had assured him was a screen that made him invisible to everyone but her. The chamber was vast and cold, and around an enormous table sat 12 of the oldest Shen in existence. Their crystalline forms were massive and deeply colored, suggesting they had lived for tens of thousands of years. Thresh stood at the center of the chamber with a collection of reports floating before him in crystalline data forms. He presented video recordings of the Queen's unstable crystalline fluctuations. He showed emotional responses that he claimed were irrational. He presented arguments that her decision to dismiss him represented a clear abuse of power, driven by emotional attachment. The Queen is no longer capable of logical thought. Thresh declared, "She has been compromised by a human diplomat. She spends her evenings with him instead of attending to state business. Her decisions are being made based on feeling instead of analysis. She represents a danger to our civilization." Queen Vexithara rose from her throne, and her form blazed with colors so intense that it looked like she was made of flame. "You call my capacity for emotional connection a disease, Thresh. But look at what your pure logic has created. We have a civilization that has achieved perfection in efficiency. We have solved every problem of survival and comfort, and yet our people are leaving. Their children are questioning why they exist, if not to experience anything worth remembering. Art has been extinct for millennia. Music was outlawed as a distraction. From poetry to dance to anything that brings joy, we have eliminated it all because we deemed it inefficient, and the result is a species that is alive but has forgotten how to live. Your Majesty, with respect, thy emotion clouds judgment and leads to poor decisions," said one of the ancient judges. "Perhaps," the Queen replied, "or perhaps logic without heart leads to decisions that are technically sound but spiritually hollow. The human doctor showed me something in 3 weeks that I had not experienced in 300 years. He showed me that to exist without feeling is not to truly exist at all." The council chamber erupted into chaos. Some of the ancient judges stood in apparent agreement with her words, while others began arguing passionately against her statements. Thresh launched into a detailed argument about the dangers of allowing one person's emotional state to affect an entire civilization. In that moment, the Queen noticed something that changed everything. Vexithara's younger sister, Kale, a queen who had been serving as a mediator among the various factions, raised her hand not in agreement with Thresh, but in a gesture that was distinctly defiant. Later, in the corridor outside the chamber, Kale approached Marcus where the Queen had directed him to wait. "My sister has made an unprecedented choice," Kale said simply. "She has chosen feeling over safety. She has chosen authenticity over perfection. The traditionalists will not forgive this easily, but there are many among our people who are hungry for change for the first time in thousands of years. If my sister can survive what is coming, everything will be different." But surviving was going to require more than wisdom. It was going to require courage from both the Queen and the human who had awakened her heart. The emergency broadcast was scheduled to be transmitted across both the Shen Collective and to every human colony world. The Council of Logic had demanded that Queen Vexithara make a formal statement to her people about her condition. They had prepared a script for her to read, and one that would have her announce her intention to undergo neural purification. Her acceptance of this procedure would supposedly restore her to proper leadership. The traditionalists who had drafted it believed they had already won, but Queen Vexithara had other plans. Marcus sat in a secure communications chamber deep within the diplomatic station. He had made a decision that violated every protocol his government had established. If he was going to be recalled and reassigned anyway, and then he might as well spend his final moments doing something that actually mattered. He had already prepared his statement and encrypted it through multiple secure channels. He had already prepared his heart for what came next. The broadcast began with the Queen seated upon her throne, her crystalline form glowing with steady blue light. She acknowledged the Council's concerns and the people's questions. She spoke about her 300 years of service and the weight of leadership. She spoke about duty and responsibility and the weight of history. Then she did something that shocked everyone listening. She set aside the script that the council had prepared for her. "I have lived for 300 years," she said, and her voice carrying across star systems. "I have made decisions that affected billions of lives. I have calculated and analyzed and determined the most logical course forward in every situation. And in all of that time, I achieved perfect efficiency and perfect results, and I was completely and utterly empty." Thresh stood from his seat in the chamber, his crystalline form flashing with what looked like anger. "Your Majesty, you are not yourself. The Council demands you follow the agreed protocol." "I am following my own protocol now," the Queen replied. "And it begins with this human named Marcus Chen. He came to my throne 3 weeks ago carrying nothing but his own humanity. He brought stories of love and loss and hope. He brought emotion, which our civilization deemed primitive and unnecessary. And he woke me up. Throughout the Hen Collective, that people stopped what they were doing to listen." Young Shen, who had never heard anyone speak with such passion, began to gather around communication screens. For the first time in 10,000 years, an ancient queen was admitting that her people's perfection might actually be a prison. "I am rejecting the neural purification," Vexithara announced. "I am keeping my capacity for emotion. I am keeping my ability to feel and to hope and to care about another being. I am becoming something that our laws say is impossible, a queen who rules with both logic and heart." Back in the communication station, Marcus took a deep breath. He activated his own broadcast authorization and linked to the Queen's transmission. The connection was established, and suddenly his face appeared on screens across both civilizations. He was visible through holographic projection in the council chamber, on the bridge of Earth's flagship, in homes and schools and gathering places everywhere. "Your Majesty, members of the Shen Council, people of Earth," Marcus began, and his voice was steady despite the way his heart was pounding. "I know I am not supposed to be here. I know I am a simple diplomat whose authority does not extend to interrupting proceedings of galactic importance. But what I have to say cannot wait any longer." He paused. And in that pause, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. "Queen Vexithara is the greatest being I have ever met. It is not because she is ancient or powerful or intelligent, though she is all of those things. It is because she has the courage to choose feeling over safety. She has the wisdom to recognize that a civilization that has optimized every aspect of existence except joy and connection is a civilization that has lost its way." Marcus looked directly at the camera, and somehow his eyes seemed to be looking across the stars at the Queen herself. "I came to your space to negotiate trade agreements and defense pacts, but I have found something far more valuable. I have found someone who shows me that emotion is not a weakness to overcome. It is a capacity that makes existence meaningful. And I am asking, not as a diplomat representing Earth, and not as a man trying to save his species, but as myself, if you would consider continuing this journey with me. Your Majesty, I know this is illogical. It is unprecedented. It is probably impossible. But it is also the most human thing I have ever done. And I am asking you now, with all my heart laid bare before these witnesses, would you consider a permanent life journey with me?" The chamber erupted in absolute chaos. Some of the council members were shouting, their crystalline forms flashing with angry colors. Others stood silent, seeming to understand something fundamental had shifted. Others looked uncertain, caught between the traditions they had defended their entire lives and something new that they could not yet name. The Queen rose from her throne. Her crystalline form began to glow, but not with fear or anger. It glowed with colors that her people had no names for, colors of joy and wonder and hope. The colors spread outward from her like ripples in water spreading through the chamber and beyond. She walked toward the holographic projection of Marcus, and every step she took seemed to carry centuries of burden being set down. She stopped before his image, and when she spoke, her voice carried love that transcended the distance between worlds. "Was that a proposal?" she asked, and her expression transformed into something that none of the ancient Gen had seen before. She smiled, a queen who lived for 300 years without knowing what joy felt like, was smiling. "Then I accept?" Kyle stood from her position in the chamber, and her crystalline form blazed with colors of support. Young Gen throughout the collective who had been watching began to cheer. A sound of hope that had not existed in their civilization for millennia began to grow. Thresh attempted to physically remove the queen from the chamber, but Kale and 2 other younger council members blocked his path. The moment stretched between loyalty to tradition and willingness to change. The future hung in the balance. Then the queen's voice rang out with absolute authority, the voice of someone who had ruled unchallenged for 300 years. "I am still your queen, and I choose this. If that is heresy, then my civilization has needed a heretic." In that moment, everything changed. The wedding ceremony took place on a world that existed between both civilizations. A place that was neither fully Gen nor fully human, but something entirely new. The venue was constructed jointly by engineers from both species working together for the first time. The result was breathtaking. On one side of the chamber, earth flowers bloomed in impossible colors and fragrances. The soil that had been brought from Earth's gardens held memories of rain and sunlight and growth. On the other side, Gen crystalline formations grew upward in fractal patterns of extraordinary beauty. The crystals sang with harmonic frequencies that moved human hearts in ways they could not fully understand. In the center, where Marcus and Vex Thera stood, both traditions merged seamlessly. Marcus wore a suit woven from threads spun by hen masters. Iridescent and alive with subtle color, Vex Thera wore a crown fashioned from human silver and precious stones, her crystalline form adorned with flowers that somehow remained alive against her surface. The contrast between her geometric perfection and the organic beauty of flowers was striking. As they joined together, both species watched. The traditionalist Shen who had opposed this union were present because their queen had demanded it, not because they agreed, but because they would witness that their monarch chose love freely and with full knowledge of what she was sacrificing. They saw their queen look at the human diplomat with expressions that their entire civilization had forgotten were possible. Thresh stood in the back of the chamber with several traditionalists. His crystalline form flickered with colors that might have been resignation or might have been something approaching acceptance. He did not leave when he could have. He stayed to witness the future, whether he approved of it or not. After the ceremony, as celebrations continued around them, Marcus and Vex Thera stood together on a balcony overlooking both the Garden of Earth flowers and the crystalline formations the sun from Earth's solar system, which had been specially brought here for this occasion. It hung low on the horizon, creating a light show that neither world could create alone. "Do you have any regrets?" Marcus asked, his hand holding hers. "For 300 years I asked questions that could only be answered with data and analysis," Vex Thera replied. "But you have taught me to ask different questions. What brings joy? What creates meaning? What makes a moment worth remembering? These questions have no logical answers. They only have human answers. And now they are my answers too." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by an urgent alert that came through the communication systems. Officers from both civilizations hurried to them with news. The Krell Dominion, a hostile empire that bordered Gen space, they had detected the weakness they believed existed in the newly unified alliance. They had mobilized their military forces and were moving toward the border with overwhelming superiority. For the first time in her 300 years of rule, Queen Vexithara looked to someone else before making a decision. She looked at Marcus and asked what he thought. Marcus, who had studied human military strategy and intuition, he found himself suggesting something that pure logic would never have produced. They would not fight a defensive war. Instead, they would use their greatest advantage. They would use the symbolic power of their union to reach out to other worlds in the galaxy. They sent messages to younger civilizations who had begun to question Krell dominance. They spoke of a future built on connection and emotion rather than fear and control. They offered partnership, not subjugation. They offered evolution, not stagnation. Across the galaxy, something unprecedented began to happen. Worlds that had lived in fear of the Krell Dominion began to defect to the Earth-Gen alliance. The humanoid Vethes came first, bringing their superior understanding of biological systems. The crystalline Navi brought their mastery of energy production. The organic Groths brought their knowledge of agricultural abundance. One by one, civilizations that had despaired of ever being free joined with those who had chosen hope. When the Krell Dominion launched their military assault, they found themselves facing not a weakened alliance, but a united coalition. Unlike previous conflicts where victory was determined by technological superiority, this battle showed the galaxy something new. Human intuition mixed with Gen precision created strategies that the Krell could not predict or counter. Human adaptability, combined with Gen discipline, produced a fighting force that was stronger than either species alone. The battle lasted only 3 days. The Krell, shocked by their first actual defeat in 1,000 years, attempted to withdraw. The coalition did not pursue them, but they did establish a defensive perimeter that made clear Krell aggression would never succeed again. After the victory, as various civilizations sent their formal recognition of the new alliance, Marcus and Vexithara watched from the observation deck of their joined flagship. The Queen's crystalline form glowed with the soft colors of contentment, while the human stood beside her, and his hand linked with hers. "Your people feared that emotion would make us weaker," Vexithara said, "but they were wrong. Feeling taught me to value things beyond power and efficiency. It taught me to see possibilities where pure logic saw only limitations. It taught me to trust in my partner and to build something that neither of us could build alone." Far below them, on a garden world that was being prepared as the new capital of the unified alliance, and a human child and a young Shin were playing together in the flowering fields. They did not see each other as different or strange. They saw only a friend. The child laughed, and the sound of human laughter mixed with the harmonic tones of young Shin. Joy creating something beautiful and new. This was the true future that Marcus and Vexithara had created, not a military alliance or a trade partnership, but a genuine fusion of two civilizations that had discovered that their differences were not obstacles to overcome, but strengths to celebrate. The Queen looked at her husband and smiled that same smile that had started everything, a smile that carried 300 years of emptiness, transforming into a moment of complete and perfect joy. "I love you," she said. And the words carried harmonics that made the air around them shimmer. "I love you too," Marcus replied, and in those simple words was encoded the hope that two different species had discovered something that transcended biology and culture and time itself. The galaxy had changed forever, and it had all begun with one human diplomat who had the courage to speak from his heart.